Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's Kyle Henderson of BamaInsider.com. Thank you for watching. Thank you for liking and subscribing. We appreciate you being here. Today, I'm talking about the Alabama football coaching staff going into the 2020 season. Now that Nick Saban has just added on his final touches, adding David Ballou and Dr. Matt Rhea. We'll talk about them later on in this program. Today is going to be a lengthy video. I'm going to talk about each particular coach, starting out with Nick Saban, work our way down from the offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and all the assistants. I'm going to talk about key bullet points for each particular coach, as well as talk about key bullet points for each particular coach, areas I feel where the coach is excelling, areas where I feel the coach needs to improve going into the 2020 season. And we'll start out with Nick Saban, age 68 now, going into the 2020 season, making a cool $8.6 million per season. Going into his 14th season at Alabama, head coach since 2007, 5 national championships since 2009, 2011, 2012, 15, and 2017, 8 SEC championships. 152-23 at Alabama, 86-15 in SEC play. Continues to grind. I mean, this is a guy, you roll up to the Mount Moore facility in Alabama, you see one of Nick Saban's 3 benzos out in front. 12, 13-hour days, loves to recruit, refers to him actually as a grad assistant on the defensive side of the football, helping out in the secondary with Karl Scott. Now, as you know, there are not many programs across the country that give Nick Saban fits that play up to Alabama's level. However, since 2016, Auburn is 2-2 against Alabama, and the same goes for Clemson, who is also 2-2, also defeated Alabama in a recent national championship game. So you look at Dabo Swinney, you look at Gus Malzahn, those have been 2 coaches that have given Nick Saban problems over the last couple seasons. Nick Saban is 3-0 against Georgia. He's beaten Kirby Smart twice. Now, Kirby Smart has certainly had opportunities to beat Nick Saban, but Nick Saban has continued to best Kirby Smart. He's also 8-1 against LSU since 2012, with a lone loss coming during the 2019 season. Get this number. I think this is absolutely phenomenal. Nick Saban is 18-0 all-time against former assistants that have turned head coach. And in 2020, Nick Saban will get to take on a plethora of former assistants. He'll take on Kirby Smart in Georgia in week 3. He'll take on Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss in week 5. Take on Jeremy Pruitt in week 8 in Tennessee. And also take on Jimbo Fisher in week 12. So that's Nick Saban. And as you know, Nick Saban, still considered the greatest of all time. 6 national championships all time at the college football level. Incredible career. And it doesn't look like he's showing any signs of slowing down. Let's move on to the offensive coordinator at Alabama, and that's Steve Sarkisian, who also coaches the quarterbacks. Now age 45, going on his 2nd season as Alabama's offensive coordinator. It looked like he took a glance at Colorado during the early 2020 season, but decided to stay at Alabama, and I think it's for good reason. Alabama's offense averaged 510 yards last season per game, 342 yards passing, 168 yards rushing per game. And as you know, he inherited a quarterback by the name of Tua Tagovailoa, who we've talked about before. He had a history with, who he was comfortable with, and he helped Tagovailoa, I feel, really develop his game through the course of Tua's junior season. Tua had 2,800 yards with 33 touchdowns, and it felt like Tua was always improving. And I think just with him and Sarkisian having history, being comfortable with each other, I think that really helped flourish Tagovailoa's game during the 2019 season. And I think that Steve Sarkisian did a great job with Mac Jones as well. A lot of these quarterbacks, just being with Sarkisian. I mean, Sarkisian has a lengthy history of working with quarterbacks. And I think we saw Mac Jones really take over and really improve throughout the course of the season. 1,500 yards and 14 touchdowns. I thought he looked fabulous against Michigan, throwing for over 300 yards with 3 touchdowns. Now, when you look at Sarkisian's mantra, this is something that I remember back to the 2019 season. He said he wants a high efficiency passing game that starts with the run. And I think we saw that last year. You saw Alabama really move the football down the field methodically, use their running backs when they needed to. Najee Harris had a monster season under Sarkisian. So I think overall, when you look at the offense, I think it was really clicking throughout the season. I think there was no slowdown. Of course, there's so many weapons on Alabama, so things could always be better. But for the most part, Steve Sarkisian did a great job leading this offense. I can't wait to see what he's going to do during the 2020 season. Now, I think down the road, Sarkisian will definitely be a head coach again. I mean, he was a head coach at USC from 2014 to 2015. He was a head coach at Washington. He did take a glance at Colorado, as mentioned earlier. So I'm not sure how much longer Steve Sarkisian's going to be at Alabama, but I think the 2020 season bodes well for the Crimson Tide. Just with him coming back, it's the first time since 2015 that Nick Saban will have his offensive coordinator back for a consecutive season. All right, now let's talk about Pete Golding, who's a defensive coordinator and also who works with the inside linebackers. Age 36, since 2018, he's going on his third season at Alabama, and he had a big jump from University of Texas, San Antonio as a defensive coordinator to Alabama after the 2017 season. Alabama's defense in 2018 ranked third nationally in scoring, 18.1 points per game, and 16th in the country in total defense, allowing just 319 yards per game. Now, if you compare that to the 2019 season, the defense ranked 13th in scoring, 18.6, almost identical, and 21st in total defense, 324.4 yards per game. So not a big jump. And Pete Golding has really become the scapegoat for everything that went wrong with Alabama's defense, right? There's a ton of Alabama defensive coaches, and we're going to go through them, but it seems like he was the biggest scapegoat. And I get it. He's a defensive coordinator, but you have to remember, Pete Golding dealt with some very big blows to the defense because of the injury bug. Dylan Moses, ACL, Joshua McMillan, ACL. So he was forced to start two freshmen at the inside linebacker position. Now, while everybody has pointed the finger right at Golding, Nick Saban has stayed in his corner, and he's continued to praise Golding. And I think Golding has a great opportunity in 2020 to prove that he can lead this defense, that he can improve this defense. How can he not? Dylan Moses coming back at inside linebacker. Joshua McMillan also returning for his redshirt senior season. You have Christian Harris, and you also have Shane Lee, who are going to have more experience because they played every single game. You also have Ali Cajo. You have Markel Benton. You have a ton of talent at that inside linebacker position and good depth. So a big year for Pete Golding. Let's see what he can do, especially on the recruiting front as well. Because as you know, Nick Saban expects you to not only bring it from the coaching X's and O's standpoint, but also you need to land some big time recruits. So we're watching Pete Golding. He's going to have another opportunity to prove himself. And I think he can do that, especially with the talent that he has returning on the defensive side of the football. All right, now let's look at Alabama's associate head coach and running backs coach in Charles Huff, only 36, and he's a very established coach. I think when you look at future high-profile offensive coordinators or a guy who could eventually be a head coach, Charles Huff is certainly one of them. Now he's in his second season at Alabama. Previously, he was at Mississippi State, and before that, he was at Penn State, where he coached and recruited Saquon Barkley. The Crimson Tide rushed for just under 170 yards per game, and I felt that Charles Huff did a great job working with these running backs and especially developing those running backs to catch the ball out of the backfield with Steve Sarkisian's West Coast style offense. You saw Najee Harris catch the football wonderfully. In 2019, he had 20 total touchdowns. 7 of those were receiving touchdowns. And Charles Huff also has an opportunity to develop some of these younger running backs. Roydell Williams, Kyle Edwards, Jace McClellan. That's a lot of new talent to develop in the backfield because, as you know, you're going to lose Najee Harris after this coming season. And I'm curious to see what Charles Huff does with Trey Sanders, with Brian Robinson, with Killen Robinson, because I think with a year now under his belt, Charles Huff will be able to really understand what each of these running backs is capable of. We're all excited to see what Trey Sanders is going to do at Alabama, and I think now a year working under Charles Huff, I think these running backs are going to be even better going into the 2020 season. All right, let's talk about Charles Kelly, who's the associate defensive coordinator and also coaches the safeties. He's age 52. This is his second season at Alabama, and talk about a wealth of knowledge. He was previously at Tennessee as an associate defensive coordinator and safeties coach from 2014 to 2017, and he was also the defensive coordinator at Florida State in the mid 2000s. Alabama's safeties last season, they had 8 interceptions. That was Xavier McKinney and Jared Maiden. We also saw that Charles Kelly was very confident to play freshman Jordan Battle plenty in 2019, which I thought was great. Jordan Battle did a great job, and Charles Kelly did a great job working with him and developing him. And I think it was really important because Charles Kelly probably knew that Xavier McKinney was going to leave after his junior season. So making sure that Jordan Battle was up to speed and ready to go for 2020 was something that he obviously had heavy emphasis on. So you're going to see Jordan Battle come back very much experienced. When you look overall at what Charles Kelly has done, remember, this is a guy, when he was a defensive coordinator at Florida State, he coached Jalen Ramsey and Derwin James. Those are NFL first-round draft picks. And also in 2020, from the recruiting calendar, Charles Kelly was recognized as the Rivals.com top 25 recruiter of the year, helping land Brian Branch and Christian Story. So not only is Charles Kelly doing it on the field with his players, but he's also making great additions to the Alabama Crimson Tide. All right, next up, we're talking about Sal Sunseri, who's Alabama's outside linebacker coach. He's age 60, entering his second season at Alabama. His 5th year actually coaching the outside linebackers for Nick Saban. Remember, he was at Alabama from 2009 to 2011. And before 2019, Sunseri was a defensive line coach at Florida and also coached the linebackers before that from 2015 to 2017 with the Raiders. Now, last season, Anthony Jennings and Terrell Lewis had a combined 14 sacks, and I think Sal Sunseri got the most out of those guys. Now, those guys had already had that veteran experience, but I think Sal Sunseri got the most out of those guys. Terrell Lewis was a little bit banged up, but I think we saw Terrell Lewis really transform into the player that he could be towards the end of the season. And I think Sal Sunseri faces some challenges this coming season. Besides Chris Allen, Alabama does not have a proven pass rusher. So I think it'll be up to Sal Sunseri to develop some of those younger guys, whether it's a King Makuta, as I mentioned, whether it's a Chris Allen or one of these younger guys, Chris Boswell, who would come in and really jump up and take the holds as Alabama's pass rusher for the 2020 season. So that'll be Sal Sunseri's challenge. He was also recognized as a Rivals.com top 25 recruiter of 2020, helping land 5-star Jamoy Kennedy and Quindarius Robinson. And when you watch Sal Sunseri coach, this is a guy who's an old school coach. He's up in your face. He's telling you how it needs to be done. He has a lot of energy, a ton of energy, and he's coming at you, and it's old school. And some people might not appreciate that, but I think the players who understand his coaching style really understand that he wants you to be the absolute best. I think Sal Sunseri could be a fantastic defensive coordinator, and the wealth of knowledge that he has and the experience that he has is worth its weight in gold on the Alabama coaching staff. So Sal Sunseri coming back for a second season at Alabama, fantastic addition that is returning for the Crimson Tide in 2020. All right, as we continue to talk about Alabama's coaches, next up is Jeff Banks, who holds the title of special teams coordinator and the tight ends coach. Only age 44, very established coach before Alabama. He was at Texas A&M, did some wonderful things at College Station. Now he's in his 3rd season at Alabama. And to me, Jeff Banks keeps it simple. He puts the playmakers at the positions they need to be at, especially on the special teams, right? You look at Alabama's kick returner last season, Henry Ruggs. You look at the punt returner, Jalen Waddle. Now, Henry Ruggs averaged 23.8 yards per attempt, and Jalen Waddle had 24.4 yards per attempt, including a touchdown. It got to the point where nobody would kick to Waddle, obviously, and it'll probably be the same thing in 2020. But I think that Jeff Banks has his challenges when you look at the kicking game. Joseph Bolivas last season, 59 of 61 PATs, but was 8 of 11 on field goals. And Will Riker, who got hurt towards the beginning of the season, he was 21 of 22 PATs, but only 4 of 7 on field goals. So Alabama still missed 6 field goals last season. And I think Alabama really has to develop a punter as well. Last year, Alabama's best punter was Ty Perrine, who had an average of 44.7 yards per punt. So when you look at the kicking game, that is Jeff Banks' challenge. Will Riker, he has to develop him, has to keep him healthy, has to figure out who's going to be the punter. Is it going to be Ty Perrine? Is it going to be Skylar DeLong? Who is the punter going to be for Alabama? Because it's a vital component of Alabama's entire game and something that really needs to be improved during the 2020 season. I think there's been several times where the special teams game has been the lone downfall of this entire team. So you're only as good as your weakest point. And if your kicking game is your biggest fault, well, that needs to be tightened up. So that's Jeff Banks' challenge. When you look at what Jeff Banks has done from a tight end perspective, during the 2018 season, he had Irv Smith to work with. That was a plug and play for Jeff Banks, being that Irv Smith was so talented and already a junior coming in with a lot of experience. Last season, Miller Forrestall coming off an injury, 15 receptions for 167 yards. But I think Miller Forrestall did a great job getting to that second level, getting to those linebackers. But Jeff Banks needs to continue to work with these tight ends. He needs to figure out if there's a tight end on this team that can be a playmaker, maybe a Jahlil Billingsley. Maybe he could be one to watch, and especially the new transfer that Alabama got, still has to sign, in Karl Tucker, who's expected to arrive in Tuscaloosa this summer. Moving on, let's talk about Kyle Flood, Alabama's offensive line coach, age 49. He's in his second season at Alabama. And when you look at Alabama's offensive line and how they performed last season, I thought they did a fantastic job. I think Kyle Flood did an excellent job figuring out the best five. And that included moving Evan Neal to the offensive guard position. He's not a guard by any means, 6'7", 360 pounds, but he was able to develop Neal enough to start every single game for the Crimson Tide. I thought that was great. He eventually moved Landon Dickerson over from guard to center. So I think finding their best five, Kyle Flood was certainly the guy for the job. He has a ton of experience. Remember, he was a head coach at Rutgers from 2012 to 2015. Also coached the Atlanta Falcons offensive line from 2017 to 2018. This is a guy that does a good job on the recruiting front as well. He has a lot of talent to work with. He really gets all the offensive linemen moving. There's not a lot of offensive linemen standing around when you watch the group work out during each practice. I think Kyle Flood is a great asset, probably an underrated coach on this team. I'm not sure if he wants to be a head coach in the future, but obviously he's been one in the past and certainly has enough experience to be one in the future. But right now, Kyle Flood, tremendous asset for the Crimson Tide, coaching the offensive line. Next up, we're talking about Alabama's cornerback coach, which is Karl Scott. Enters his third season at Alabama. Last year, Alabama was 11th in the nation in pass defense, 187 yards per game. 5th in the nation in interceptions with 17. So I think Karl Scott has already made a big impact to Alabama. Last year, did a great job working with Trayvon Diggs and Patrick Surtain. Trayvon Diggs coming back after that foot injury from the 2018 season, did a great job in 2019. I know some people have a different opinion on that, but when you look at the fact that Trayvon Diggs and Patrick Surtain had a combined 16 pass deflections and their Pro Football Focus numbers were very high, I think those guys did a great job. Now, Rivals.com also recognized Karl Scott as a top 25 recruiter of the year. Scott helped land Rivals 100 running back Jace McClellan and also Rivals 100 linebacker Drew Sanders. I think where Karl Scott will face challenges in 2020 will be developing a corner to replace Trayvon Diggs. Is it going to be Jalen Armour Davis? Is the new corner going to be Ronald Williams, who just transferred from Hutchinson's junior college? So Karl Scott has plenty of talent to work with, especially some of these younger guys. Could it be Josh Jobe, who enters his junior year? His challenge is going to be to find that corner that can play lockdown, because it looks like Alabama might move Patrick Surtain to the star position, which would mean that Alabama needs to replace both corners going into 2020. I assume that we'll find out more going into springtime, but so far, Karl Scott has done a great job at Alabama developing these cornerbacks. Big year for Karl Scott. We'll see what he can do developing the two new corners for the Crimson Tide. Now let's talk about Holmon Wiggins, who enters his second season at Alabama, coaching the wide receivers. Now talk about just coming in and inheriting Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Devontae Smith, and Jalen Waddle, right? You come in like a kid in a candy store. Jerry Jeudy is gone, Henry Ruggs is gone, but you return Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle. So Holmon Wiggins still has a ton of talent to work with, but now he has to work with some of these younger guys, right? He has to get John Mechie to really be the guy to rise up, which I think he will. He has to figure out a way for Terrell Shavers to get on the field. He has to develop guys like Slade Bolden and other guys at the wide receiver position, which I think he will. But it's going to be up to him to develop these next wide receivers to continue this legacy of greatness. Because over the last several seasons, Alabama has been putting out big-time wide receivers, and they're going to put out 2 first-round draft picks in the 2020 draft. So Holmon Wiggins doing a great job. And he's doing a good job on the recruiting front as well, but he needs to do a great job to continue that legacy. I think Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith will help him do just that. But the guys behind him is where we're really going to see what Holmon Wiggins can do with his wide receiving core going down the road. Now let's talk about new addition Freddie Roach, who will be taking over for Brian Baker, coaching the defensive line. Now, Freddie Roach is all Alabama. Freddie Roach was the director of player development at Alabama from 2015 to 2017. And from 2008 to 2010, Roach coached at Alabama, where he was an assistant strength and conditioning coach. Yes, Freddie Roach also played at Alabama and was a 4-year letterman from 2002 to 2005 as a linebacker. So Freddie Roach back at Alabama, I think this is a great pickup. This guy's young, energetic. He's going to be able to connect with these younger guys, do a great job on the recruiting scene. Freddie Roach is all Alabama as well, so he knows the process. Nick Saban knows him. They have good continuity. So Freddie Roach joining the staff, I think, is a tremendous pickup, and I think he'll be able to get a fire under these defensive linemen. And when you look at some of these younger defensive linemen, they have experience, but they need that fire. That fire that we saw from Christian Barmore, that needs to spill over to guys like DJ Dell, Fidarian Mathis, LeBron Ray. You're talking about LeBron Ray, who could be have a breakout season in 2020. Freddie Roach needs to be able to inspire these defensive linemen to not only stop the run, but to also get after the quarterback. Now, as you saw, Nick Saban just added 2 new names to the staff, David Ballou and Dr. Matt Ray. Let's talk about David Ballou first. His position, Director of Sports Performance. This is next level what Nick Saban's doing. Ballou was the former Director of Athletic Performance at Indiana for the past 3 seasons. He was also the strength coach at IMG from 2015 to 2016. Has a very good relationship with some players at IMG, obviously, one being Dylan Moses, who already said on social media he was excited to get working with David Ballou once again. And then you also have Dr. Matt Ray. This is a package deal. And Dr. Matt Ray is like Dr. Speed. His title, Director of Performance Science. He was an athletic performance coach from 2018 to 2019 at Indiana. He was a director of the sports science program at the IMG Academy from 2016 to 2017. He launched a sports consulting company in 2001, providing direction in areas of athlete development and speed training and injury prevention. So Nick Saban loses Scott Cochran. He replaces Cochran with 2 of the most innovative minds in sports science. You add that with Alabama's new sports and science technology center that's going to be opening soon. Talk about a match made in heaven. This is next level. We already talked about it. Nick Saban staying ahead of the curve. Gigantic additions to the staff, adding David Ballou and Dr. Matt Ray. All right, now let's talk about the analysts that are on Alabama's staff. Now, this is mind-blowing, right? Look at all the head coaching experience that is behind the scenes. And it starts out with Butch Jones, who is a special assistant to the head coach. He just got that title going into the 2020 season. Nick Saban loves this guy, loves his organizational skills. Butch Jones on top of it. He was the head coach at Tennessee from 2013 to 2017. Yeah, and we already talked about this. Butch Jones still making $52,000 per week. He was also the head coach at Central Michigan from 2007 to 2009. Mike Stoops, also on the staff as a defensive analyst. Second season at Alabama, former assistant head coach and defensive coordinator at Oklahoma from 2012 to 2018. He was also the head coach at Arizona from 2004 to 2011. So look at the head coaching experience behind the scenes. Major Applewhite is another offensive analyst, second season at Alabama, former head coach at Houston from 2016 to 2018, former assistant coach at Texas from 2008 to 2013, and he coached the quarterbacks actually at Alabama in 2007. And lastly, the latest defensive analyst that Nick Saban has added, Charlie Strong. First season at Alabama, head coach at South Florida from 2017 to 2019, head coach at Texas from 2014 to 2016, and the head coach at Louisville from 2010 to 2013. I mean, the amount of knowledge from the analysts on this staff is incredible. Nick Saban loading up this staff is phenomenal. Hey, so we want to hear from you in the comment box. What do you think about Alabama's 2020 coaching staff from top to bottom? Do you feel that this is one of the best staffs that Nick Saban has put together? What are the strengths in your opinion? What are the weaknesses? Do you think that Steve Sarkisian can lead this offense to the promised land? Do you think that Pete Golding has enough knowledge and is capable to lead this defense? to show improvement to the defense going into the 2020 season? Love to hear from you in the comment box. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe. We'll catch you soon back on BamaInsider.com. Reporting from beautiful Tuscaloosa, Alabama, this is Kyle Henderson, BamaInsider.com.